Hello and welcome to the third episode of NoCB, a grand strategy podcast where we discuss the latest goings-on in the grand strategy genre. A lot of times that means the games made by Paradox Development Studio, but also a few others here and there. Also, I can take off this countdown thing. There we go. I'm TJ Hafer, I'm your host, and here with me is our inimical panel, including Rose.
Hello.
Including Lambert.
Hello there.
And including Father Loris.
Hello.
And we're back from a little bit of a winter break after our first two episodes. Hopefully going to be on a regular schedule of streaming every Wednesday and being on iTunes and everything else every Thursday. So Paradox has also been on kind of a winter break, which means we haven't really gotten a lot of dev diaries, which is normally kind of our first segment. But we did get what was referred to as a little teaser about some naval changes coming to Hearts of Iron 4 that has more, or not Hearts of Iron 4, Europa Universalis 4. Yes, exactly. That has actually more information in it than some previous entire dev diaries do. So I think we'll start with that. They're adding Marines to the game where you can do various things to turn a portion of your force limit into a Marine force limit. They're very good at crossing rivers and doing coastal landings, but they also take a lot of shock damage as a quote-unquote balance. I'm not sure that's necessarily needed if the number of them you can build is so limited. I don't know if they really needed to
they do
just make them garbage as regular troops.
Johan does say that if your army is 50% Marines, so I'm guessing you can do things to increase your limits.
Is that what they meant?
Yep, it says the default is 0%. So I'm guessing it's going to be added in through either technologies or through ideas, things you can do, or possibly even events to make more Marines.
That maybe I totally misinterpreted that because I didn't think it was like a ratio of your army that is optimal. I thought it was like a hard limit on the number of Marines you could build, period.
No, it's a fraction of your force limit.
Yeah, what's Lambert saying?
Yeah. So naval ideas are going to be good for it. Recruiting Act policy, the Portuguese, naval doctrine, English redcoats, and Britannia rules the waves all really give boosts to your force limit for Marines.
Which
the default is 0. So as a whole, you're not going to be fielding Marines. It's only if you take these ideas, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that part I got. It was the fact that they gave them the plus 25 shock damage taken that was what was weird to me.
That's really big. That's like essentially a lot of the damage, especially early game, is shock damage, right?
They take an extra damage. They take extra damage though as a drawback.
Right.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, you're not going to be fielding so many Marines in the early game, which is when shock damage is more important. They seem more like late game units to me.
Right. So what I was saying is that I'm not necessarily sure that they need a drawback because they already have a drawback that most people can't build them at all. And even if you go for like Marines are going to be my thing, you're always going to be limited in how many you can build. So it seems like a ballast where one is not needed to give them that plus 25% shock damage too.
Yeah, I can see that.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of Stellaris with the dreadnoughts, because you're limited to a certain amount of them depending on your empire. And they're really powerful, but they're also slow.
Right.
You're also limited by sailors, right? Which is a smaller resource pool than manpower.
They use sailor manpower.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of having Marines in the game. I was actually thinking during my last Imperator game, because I've been going through Adrian Goldsworthy's History of the Punic Wars recently, and the idea that Marines are kind of a distinct thing that exists separately from infantry, and that you could make that something you want to prioritize was definitely true during the classical period, for sure. So I'm hoping that the fact they're adding them to EU4 means they'll consider adding them to Imperator in the future.
There was certainly a thing during the Napoleonic Wars with Britain as well.
Yeah.
The army and the navy were very distinct entities that didn't have a lot of crossover, and the Marines, the navy was able to do a lot of things on its own.
That is an interesting point from chat about for pirate nations, as long as they use sailors, Marines will be very useful.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that since I haven't played a pirate nation in forever. But that's a really good point. Yeah, and I mean, just like playing a country like Portugal too, like, I mean, this seems like they're just trying to, not just trying, it seems like they're really trying to make Portugal more interesting, because sort of the way that they built their empire was parking a bunch of boats in a harbor and like taking over these little smaller ports all over the world instead of trying to just lay claim to huge swaths of land. Brazil maybe being an exception to that. And I've tried to play Portugal that way in EU4 previously, and while it is possible, I think it's going to be a lot more viable of a strategy with the way that this works now.
Just gameplay wise, I'm looking forward to using sailors more of a, there's this island that I need to take, but there's a small garrison there and I don't want to waste my normal troops. Let me just bring in the sailors. Like, that'd be quite nice. Something
Right.
like Malta being garrisoned and you need it for something that's going to be useful.
Yeah, they seem very like situational, you know. So say if it's like a Caribbean island or something with a bunch of troops sat on it, or you're trying to get Cyprus, you know, which I think is the one problem.
Yeah.
If you're playing
Now the other thing
Switzerland-
that's okay, go ahead.
If you're playing Switzerland, Marines aren't going to be as useful to you.
No, I wouldn't
Right.
have thought so.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to cross Lake Geneva really quickly, maybe. So the other thing that's kind of an interesting twist is that they're actually adding coastal defenses and naval batteries to the game, which I'm a little bit iffy about this too, because the naval batteries cause like a fixed amount of hostile fleet attrition to any fleet that is present, you know, in a sea zone that's adjacent to a province with a naval battery. As far as I can tell, there's no way for your fleet to fight back. It's just like, as long as they're here until you capture the province, they're going to be taking damage, which seems kind of one-sided in favor of the defensive nation. Whereas, you know, historically, if you got enough ships with enough guns, you could just blow up the coastal batteries and kind of be done with it. I'm not sure what I think about that. What about you guys?
It's going to be a pain to get to Venice.
Yeah.
Sailing all the way down the Adriatic Sea is going to be an awful pain.
Yeah.
They are
It'll be worse if it
Diplotech
stacks.
12, though, so not exactly early game.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
I did ask Grugy about this as well. He said it's going to be a monthly tick on the attrition rather than on arrival. So I kind of prefer on arrival, so that, you know, you take that attrition tick as soon as you enter the sea province, rather than, I sailed through it fast enough, bye-bye, you can't get me, haha. Like,
Well, I guess when you look at the size of the sea zones in EU4, it's kind of plausible that you could just sail out of range of them, but I don't know. I feel like if there's going to be an ability to attack fleets from land, there also needs to be a similar way for fleets to... And Imperator actually has this now with the Mega Polyremes, where you can, you know, click a button and, you know, have them take out a coastal fort or whatever.
Yeah.
I guess it's going to make it much more viable to use blockading fleets as a way to assist a siege, and it's going to make it much, much, much more costly to use blockading fleets as like a means of containment or economic warfare.
There should be a way, like, if your fleet is large enough, it negates the hostile fleet attrition.
Right.
Or if
wondering
your
how it
fleet has
interacts
enough
with-
of the larger ships.
I'm wondering how it interacts with the maritime finisher, which gives repair damage while at a coastal province or coastal sea tile. Because would that completely negate the entire naval battery? It's like, oh yes, you blew a hole in my ship, but I fixed it before you could blow another one in.
I guess if you have that idea unlocked, it might end up evening out. I'd be curious to see how that's actually going to work. So I guess the idea now is that you just want to bring Marines with you so that you can shut down coastal batteries. Maybe that's what they're trying to incentivize.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
You know, that could be a way. Your fleet's moving in. Let's move in with the land troops. Pull your own Battle of North.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see Marines not take at-sea attrition.
That would be cool too, yeah.
That would make them worth it for me.
Yeah, or at least let you unlock technologies later on that reduce their sea attrition. Other than that, I like most of the new stuff the new buildings are doing. I like, the ability that you can defend against blockades. I like the fact that you can increase the hostile disembarkment time. That I feel like will add some interesting strategic considerations, sort of aiming in the direction of making naval warfare and land warfare not as disconnected as they seem in a lot of grand strategy games when, historically that really wasn't the case as much.
Especially, late game for Europa Universalis, right? I mean, going into the Napoleonic Wars pretty important.
Yeah. The Navy could make or break the land battles.
Naval war has kind of always played second fiddle in most Paradox games, so I'm for anything that kind of makes it more relevant.
Yeah, same. I think, Man the Guns was like a big step forward, I think.
The thing with Man the Guns is a lot of people complain they can't figure out the naval side.
I
mean, like...
that's where I'm at.
I can get that for someone like myself who only has a couple 100 hours in it and doesn't play and didn't even really fully understand the naval battles before Man the Guns came out. But I have to wonder when someone's had, several thousand hours in the game and they're just having trouble understanding the naval battles. Is that a player issue still, or is that now a design issue?
Yeah, Hearts of Iron naval warfare has always been a weird one to me because I feel like with most countries, you win the war on land, more than anything else, and the not only scientific and industrial investment, but also the attention investment that you have to make to play the naval game well isn't worth the sacrifices to all three of those things that you have to make, in terms of I'm taking my resources and my attention away from the land war. I mean, obviously for certain things like the Pacific Theater, that's not as much the case.
Yeah, I think it depends on the nation, right? So it's like, Japan and Britain, two island nations. Maintaining a strong air force and navy is very, very
It's your
important.
shield. It's your wall.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Your wooden wall.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, steel wall at the time, if we're talking Hoi.
Well, I think of a Japanese case. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of my... I wouldn't say problem or issue, but it's something about Stellaris that isn't the most fun for me is the combat. And I think it's because it's basically naval warfare in space. And naval warfare has never been all that engaging.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think it's just most people don't like Navy. I really love naval battles. I think that's the most interesting part of a war and stuff. But I think when most people look at the great battles, they don't look at naval engagements. Or they don't look at like naval structure. It's mostly about the army, right?
Well, we're British. We built a column about a naval battle.
Yeah, but like even on the British theatre, like you think of the great things that we celebrate culturally, it's things like El Alamein, right? And the desert campaign.
Well, there's also Trafalgar, so
I
guess it evens out a little bit.
I guess. But I think we overemphasize Waterloo too. I think like how many British people were in Waterloo? There was like not many. I think there was almost as many Dutch people as British people. And then, of course,
you know how many there were? Just enough.
Just enough. Oh man.
Yeah, I think you're onto something though, because I would rather have a space game that has like really detailed mechanics for capturing planets and planetary battles, versus having all the emphasis be on what happens in space, which. The counter argument to that I hear a lot is that, if you realistically, if you control space, there's nothing the people on the ground can really do. But I don't know if that's necessarily true or fun.
No, I don't think it is necessarily.
Most sci-fi novels that you read that are space operas.
Mm-hmm.
Once you control the
space.
But I
mean, it's a bit like if you control space, it's like, oh yes, I control all of the land between your forts, for example, your strong cities. It's like, okay, well, we have the cities, and the cities are the planets in this case.
Yeah.
Well, even for example, Robert Heinlein's book Starship Troopers, where of course the focus is on the Marines who land in the capsules. I don't know if anyone here has not read Starship Troopers, but if you haven't, the Marines land in their individual capsules and they have awesome powered armor. I'm talking about the book, not the movie. The movie forgets the powered armor, which is like the coolest part.
Yeah.
But they even mention how the navies hold the skies, and that allows the Marines to land, but they can't control the planet until the Marines have done their job.
Yeah. I mean, that's the same as 40K.
Yeah, I mean, because there aren't a lot of nations on Earth that have ever become internally self-sufficient, though some have tried. But a planet can be fairly internally self-sufficient. I mean, I guess it depends on what kind of society they are. If they're a trade federation, so to speak, they're more likely to be crippled by orbital blockades. But, if it's just like Tachanka from Mass Effect, like the Krogan, like they'll just hunker down, on their homeworld, and I mean, you can bomb them from orbit, I guess, if they don't have any way to respond to that. That becomes a problem. But I would love to see more. I would love to see richer ground combat in Stellaris, personally.
Though I can't see it getting added in currently in what we have now with Stellaris.
Right. I mean,
the planetary battles are so basic they're the most basic form of warfare in any of the Paradox Grand Strategy games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't see them actually being able to rework everything. Maybe it's a thought and suggestion for the future if they do a Stellaris 2.
Yeah.
If we're talking about like what we'd like to see reworked in Stellaris, I want to see smaller navies, honestly. And I know you can see screenshots of really massive navies, but if we're talking about like games with really good naval combat, Stellaris doesn't really hold a torch to Battlefleet Gothic for me. I want to see like smaller fleets with more control over individual ships. That would be my dream. Stellaris with Battlefleet Gothic battles.
Yeah, it lacks... Of all of the Paradox games, I think it's the one that is the most lacking in intimacy, and that might be why it's the one that I play the least these days. I mean, they've taken steps to improve that in certain respects, like artifacts and archaeology and stuff was a very good way to inject more intimacy. The whole survey system is cool, but I feel like everything is such a zoomed out. Macro level, like I would rather play a space grand strategy game that's something like The Expanse, where it's like we're dealing with one solar system.
Oh yeah,
and that's broken up. Each planetary body is broken up into provinces, And, that kind of scale, I think, would make a much more interesting Space Grand Strategy game than the sort of assumption that every Space Grand Strategy game has taken since Master of Orion, which is that we're dealing with the scale of entire galaxy.
Now I'm wanting to see if there's a mod that basically has the Expanse as the entire, galactic map. It's just the solar system. And clicking on like the individual stars would bring you like to Earth. Oh man, I'm gonna search for that mod. I hope that's a thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of scales in between the world and the galaxy that we could play with that hardly any strategy designer has really given a lot of thought to. But we should move on to our next bit of news, which is since we haven't had another CK3 dev diary yet, we wanted to go over the big CK3 FAQ, which is sort of a roundup of all of the dev responses from all of the dev diaries so far.
It's also, they did the Crusader Kings Discord. They did an FAQ with developers.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we'll go through. Or go for it.
Which, if you're not a member of that Discord and you're interested in Crusader Kings, I can put an invite in chat, but basically it's just discord.gg/CK3.
Yeah, it's a good server.
Mm-hmm. It's a very good server.
I pop in there from time to time.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll go through every single answer individually, but what stuck out to you guys the most out of these answers?
Learning more about the knights and the sort of man-at-arms systems. Like, those are the things that are really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Knights being like individual characters that are, fighting the battle. You have more than 3 characters fighting in a battle, which is, it's quite nice. Learning
more
about
ways to
the
get
knights
rid of
and man-at-arms
unwanted
is great.
sons.
Man-at-arms being like unique to cultures, so you're gonna have some very unique types of units wandering around with their own bonuses that maybe you'll be able to hire, and I like that.
Yeah, more cultural differences between each nation. Great. Rather than knights having Hoskals or something, that would be great, right?
Right. I mean, the fact that every culture group only got one unique unit in CK2 was a little bit disappointing.
Was there anything in the FAQ question answer thing that was disappointing for you?
There's a handful of I'm still kind of bummed that baronies are not going to be a unit of control. The fact that you own a county and then that county is inseparable takes away some of the appeal of the fact that we have a much more detailed map this time around. It's still going to be very cool on a tactical level to be able to maneuver in these much smaller areas with different terrain and things like that. But I'm disappointed that it's going to lack the political granularity of something like Imperator, where there's all of these tiny little territories that can all be, conquered and
create border gore
given away. Right. That might be the thing that I'm most bummed about right now. Also, that cadet branches aren't necessarily going to be something that arises organically in like a historical way.
It says
as far as
AI characters, though, are motivated to create cadet branches if they get their own power and such, which I feel is rather historical.
It is. I think in a practical gameplay sense, it's gonna be a really fun feature. In a like pedantic historical simulation sense, I do wish there was a way that you could marry off a daughter and then, her son starts a cadet branch or something, which is how cadet branches happened a lot in actual history. But maybe somebody will figure out a way to mod that in. We do have the historical immersion project for CK2. Loris, was there anything that stuck out to you about the FAQ answers at all?
Not for me personally, because a lot of these things are things that I brought up at PDXCon. If I'm honest, maybe the UI stuff a little bit. I was hoping there'd be a lot more improvement in the UI. Maybe that's a little bit.
Well, we still have time with the UI.
Yeah.
Nitpick.
Especially when we consider the UI feels of CK2 early on in the dev diaries to how it is now, or even how it was on release to how it is now.
Well, yeah. See, I'm one of these people who likes the old, rather than having a sleek black UI. Sorry, I quite like the medieval aesthetic they went with in CK2.
Yeah, it does look a lot more modern and a lot less, of the period.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah, I mean, aesthetically, I think I agree. In terms of the way it's organized, I do like the new layout a lot better.
Oh, yeah, I'd agree there.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, just in terms of the character screen on CK2 was always just kind of a confusing mess.
It got better after Holy Fury, but yes.
Right.
Yeah. I think the character screen, everything about the layout in the UI is great. It's just the aesthetic, I think. It's off for me personally, but it's something I could probably get used to be honest.
Yeah.
It's not like the biggest problem in the world.
The font. We see the font in the tooltips. It looks much easier to read than the CK2 font is at times.
We should have gone with really, really old writing that's just completely illegible.
Yeah. Oh god.
You play as a Norse person, it's like runic language, and you can't work it out whatsoever. It's just like scrapes and scratches.
You're giving me flashbacks to the monastery mission in Kingdom Come Deliverance, having to translate Latin.
Oh, I was so bad at that. I could not read the ligatures or anything.
That's for future. I think I should do it all in Latin. I
think I got one manuscript right in the entire course of that whole segment of the game.
I think that's the individual mission that made me go, you know what? It's faster to just kill the priest and get out of here.
Yeah, that was it. That whole thing was just a test of patience. Eventually, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna kill him and drag his body because I'm kind of tired of this whole thing.
That's the thing with games. At what point does the challenge stop being a fun challenge and start just being work?
Yeah.
When you have to transcribe fucking Latin.
Yeah, it's immersive though. Rose, did anything in particular stick out to you going over the old FAQ?
The FAQ. I mean, one thing was about how it's going to be a lot harder to lose or gain personality traits, which is something that I saw. What was it? I think when I was playing CK2 the other day. Oh yeah, I think we were. Yeah. Oh yeah, we were. My character was trying to murder someone. They succeeded. They were happy, and then they lost Deceitful the next second.
Yeah. And I also like that. I like that there's a lower soft cap on personality traits because it really did get kind of muddled and confusing. If you looked at somebody in CK2 who has 7 different personality traits, it's like, all right, if I was going to write a novel about this person, maybe I would be able to give each of those the nuance that they deserve. But if I'm just looking at my vassal and I want to know what kind of a guy he is, that's a little bit too much complexity. Just give me the high notes. Give me the broad overview. Who is this guy?
And, and it shouldn't change quite so quickly.
Right.
As well as CK2, some of the personalities is like, oh, I've now got this negative personality. I know how to fix this. I'll change my focus to be carousing, and if I do this enough, I'll get rid of this bad trait that I don't like. I need this trait. Let me do this.
I've become a greedy drunkard, and so I'm going to go practice religion for a while and pray it away. We'll be good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Always works. I mean, name a problem prayer didn't fix.
I do like that in CK2 the way to cure depression is to just go drinking with your friends a lot.
I found depressed really useful. Depressed is the most useful trait in the game because then you can choose when you die.
You can abdicate whenever you want.
Yeah.
That actually, I went searching for the depressed trait once just so I could kill myself so that my son, who is the spawn of Satan, could inherit before he was 16. So I could get the achievement of being the spawn of Satan as he takes over the...
Oh, this game. This game.
Yeah.
Take the business focus so you can kill yourself.
Rose and Loris, did either of you guys see anything in here that you felt was disappointing or that you wanted more information about?
Everything? What, more information on everything?
Well, yeah. I guess more did anybody else have anything they saw that kind of disappointed them or that they would like to see maybe change directions?
I mean, I think everyone would be disappointed about every single Dynasty shield. But Dynasty shields are not a thing. You're bound to be disappointed by that. But, I mean, it's understandable. You know what I mean? It's like...
Yeah.
I can understand why they didn't, go into the minutiae of the detail of all the Dynasty shields, historic Dynasty shields, but...
It'd be pretty impossible.
Yeah, but
there was a couple of things.
Okay.
So, one of the questions was, will we be able to choose our own coat of arms when making cadet branches? And that's a no. And I was a bit iffy on that one. And the other one, I was initially very disappointed in it. That is...
Are you sure, Lambert? Because they say if I found a house, can I choose the name and motto? And they said, of course.
Name and motto are different, but I'm talking about the flag, basically, of your house sigil.
That's true.
And it's going to be an amalgamation of your parents' house sigils, I think.
Yes.
And the other one is your troops on the field. The models for them are probably only going to be infantry. They won't have elephants and horses for the land units. And I think that's sort of doing what they did with Imperator, because they're going to have some kind of 3D, more interactive animations. They're only going with infantry again, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're playing as... I mean, there aren't any step boards in the game at launch, but yeah, if I'm playing as an army that mostly uses horses, I want to see horses. I don't know. Maybe it'll be included in a DLC later down the line.
When they inevitably add hordes, they have to add horses as the model. They have to.
And even then, if they're just adding infantry, it's not like with Imperator where there's also chariots. And even as I said, if you're just adding horses, you would just have to have combat for horse versus horse and horse versus infantry versus horse. Yeah. That's what, 3 designs?
Personally, I think I would prefer a more simplified combat animations and have a large range of models over having a single model and more complicated animations. But that's my personal preference, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say because a lot of times you don't see. Like, the only time you see an artillery unit in EU4 is right after you build it, or if you got beaten so badly that most of the survivors are artillerymen, and you see it while they're running away.
That's after every single multiplayer combat.
Right, exactly.
I quite like that. Yeah, it's like you sort of, you have the artillery, it's like, oh, okay, it's a hobbled, terrible army.
We lost, but we managed to bring away our cannons.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I mean, that's all that really counts, isn't it, Napoleon?
That's right.
I think it was CK2 where they added some kind of script. It might have been EU4 actually, where if you had a certain amount of war elephants, even if they weren't the majority of your force, it would just show an elephant because
that was
people
EU4,
people like looking at elephants. So I feel like you'd need to do something like that to make it worthwhile to have that many different models. But like I definitely think if you're playing as like the Kipchaks or the Mongols, your default unit should be a horseman, not an infantryman. But
definitely. I think when they expand to add hordes, that's probably going to come with it. Or riot. So. I mean, either is cool.
Yeah. Any last thoughts on the FAQ from anybody?
Incest is Wincest. Back again. So good. So it's good.
Yeah, of course.
There was an interesting... one of the questions was about having bisexual characters instead of just having characters be straight or gay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Which...
And it's... Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I think is a good thing and very interesting and kind of historically accurate from a point of view. As well as being realistic definitely. Of humans.
And that it's not a trait anymore. It's like a separate, hard point on your character, I guess, for lack of a better term. Yeah. I'll be curious to see if it can change throughout a game. I'm definitely all for more bisexual representation in CK2. So, that'll bring us to our main topic this week, which is sort of inspired by the fact that Kaiserreich is finally out of alpha for Hearts of Iron 4 after all of these years. The fabled China patch finally dropped. I haven't gotten a chance to play around with it much. But we wanted to talk about mods and sort of how mods are a big pillar of grand strategy, how they can extend the lifespan of a game. I think, what was the statistic they gave us at PDXCon about what percentage of players play Hearts of Iron 4 with a mod? I remember it was really high.
Yeah, it was.
Surprisingly high, yeah.
I want to say it was like over 60% of all new campaigns that are started have some kind of mod running.
It was
I know I play mods for Hoi 4 way more than I play vanilla.
That's true for all of the games for me.
Yeah.
I think Stellaris might just be the only one I don't really do that with, to be honest. Yeah, I think every other mod's like Victoria.
Yeah, I don't run a lot of mods in EU4, generally, other than graphical mods.
Yeah, no, same. It's mainly graphical.
I still need to play.
They still count, though.
Yeah, I still need to play MEIOU and taxes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you do.
Yes, I am reminded of that constantly.
MEIOU and taxes needs to release 3.0. Flopsy, I know you're in chat.
Is that who that is?
Yeah, he's one of the modders there.
Oh, sweet, cool. Do you guys have a favorite mod for a grand strategy game?
Mayo and taxes. Without a shadow of a doubt, without any hesitation at all, so, it is the pinnacle of modding for me. It is fantastic.
So, like if you were gonna sort of like sell it as like an elevator pitch, what is it that you love about it so much?
All the things you don't like about EU4, like development, it's not a thing. It's actually interesting now. Basically, it's more historically accurate. There's more granularity to everything that you do. Your choices actually matter, and your nobles push back at you. It's just the pinnacle of EU4 mods, and for me, mods in general.
So it has like dynamic population growth, right? Like development goes up without you having to click a button.
Well, it used to be that development was removed entirely in favor of population. So every point of development was, I think it was 10,000 people, and that would grow over time and grow faster if you had more buildings. But that had the problem where a very high population province with trash all in the way of buildings in it was harder to take. It cost more war score than somewhere that had less population, but it was very well developed. So they changed it in the Heresy patch to be development as a kind of score that takes into account population and your infrastructure to give a more accurate representation. And yeah, that was a really good choice. So yeah, dynamic, and the more buildings you build, you'll grow different populations faster, and you'll have more immigration of, artisans coming to work in the workshop you've just built, kind of thing. And it's just amazing, and you should play it It's great.
All right. Well, as soon as 3.0 comes out, I'll put that on the table. I'll definitely give it a really good shot finally.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
I think I played it. It must have been PDX Con. What was the first fan convention? Was it 2016?
I think 17 was the first fan one.
Oh yeah, because 17. Yeah, so 2017 was the last time I played it. So and it killed my computer. So I'm sure it's come a long way since then.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I think I played it years and years and years ago. That's it.
Rose, do you have a favorite mod?
See, I'm one of those people that plays very rarely with mods.
Okay. Interesting.
I mean, in terms of CK2, I do like some of the overhaul mods, such as the Game of Thrones one. It's amazing how much they've brought to life.
It's the best Game of Thrones game ever by like a long shot.
Yes.
None of the official games come anywhere even close to being as good as that mod.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in terms of...
I don't like the Game of Thrones mod.
I mean, in terms of...
What's that?
Oh, little
I'm going to out
mods?
myself as a heretic. Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, so in terms of like little mods for CK, there's ones like, ruler designer unlocked. So you can go in and you don't have to worry about adding years to your character. Design the character you want to. Tell the story.
I use that one quite a bit. Yeah.
There's one of animal diversity, which basically makes a lot more colored portraits for when you play Animal World or Animal Kingdom.
Oh, of course, of the utmost importance. Yeah.
Very, very important. You can't have everyone looking the same. You can't have clones.
No. Yeah.
Though I have to say...
It ruins my immersion when I'm playing as a hedgehog emperor.
Though I have to say, the one I loved the most was the last time I played a Horse Lord, and Agamede made a bigger list mod. Did he make it, or is it someone else? Hold on. It was someone... No, he found it for me.
Is it the horse name mod?
No, it's bigger lists. So when you're playing as the Horse Lord, and you're having to give away 30 titles because you just inherited again and everyone's upset and they want more land, or you just want a war, you can actually see more than 6 titles at a time.
Oh,
wonderful.
It's lovely. It's absolutely amazing.
Bigger UI mods are always my go-to when I'm playing EU4. Like, it's necessary to enjoy the game.
If you are playing as an actual horse lord, as in an ungulate, I actually have a mod that is still active on the workshop where I added hundreds of personal names and dynasty names from history and fiction for different horses. I think I have like every famous horse in there that has like ever been mentioned on Wikipedia, at least. I think it's called Horse is Yes. Yes. So
that's an instant download.
If you're tired of your horse counselor always being named Glitterhoof, it'll give you a full name list that is longer than the other cultural name lists in CK2.
How could you dismiss
personal
Glitterhoof?
and dynasty names?
Glitterhoof's amazing.
Glitterhoof's still in there.
Glitterhoof's fine, but he's no Bucephalus.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So Lambert, you said you're a heretic because you don't like the Game of Thrones mod for CK2?
I don't, because the first time I played it, the Robots Rebellion is the one of the start dates, and I was playing there, and so they took Rhaegar Targaryen as a prisoner, and then they just released him. I'm like, Robert wouldn't do that. He straight up wouldn't do that, and it killed my immersion. And CK2 is all about immersion.
Yeah, it is interesting when we have such a close relationship with some of those characters, and the randomness of CK2 kind of has them behaving in ways. It's even true of historical figures, I think, in some cases, behaving in ways that you really wouldn't expect them to. Yeah. But that's also an interesting thing about the Game of Thrones mod in general, is that I think it's the most fun when the characters you know from the books and the show are still alive. And then it kind of loses some of its luster once they're dead. I mean, when you're playing as like the great-great-grandson of Ned Stark, it doesn't feel as Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Especially if you've like conquered the Vale of Arryn and the Riverlands, and it's like, I don't know if the Starks would actually do this. This doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I can see your point there.
Yeah. It's always interesting to see who turns up at the wall, you know. That's interesting. If you play the wall, it's like, oh, Tywin Lannister's here now? He's just arrived at the court? Okay.
Yeah.
I quite like the Elder Kings mod for CK2. That one was good.
Yeah, same.
I have heard good things about that one.
I think we've talked about it on the show before. I think that I mentioned my main complaint with it is the fact that CK2 isn't set up to handle having like multiple non-breeding fantasy races, which isn't anything on the mod creators. It's just kind of on the engine. Like a lot of that is hard coded, and they have to do a lot of weird cheats to simulate that. Like Crusader Kings 2, like at its basic fundamental design level, is not designed to model multiple races of like sapient beings who do not interbreed. Like that's not something it's really set up for. Which is why I think some of the fantasy mods haven't worked that great for me.
Problem with.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say that's a problem with the Lord of the Rings mod for Imperator as well.
Right.
I gave it a try. It was still pretty early, like alpha or beta. And I was playing as Sauron, and one of the Wringwraiths had a very poor run of luck and ended up brain damaged with syphilis.
Ooh.
Yeah, see?
And so it didn't really... They probably should also be immune to disease, I would say.
Yeah.
How did he get syphilis?
I don't want to
think about it.
Don't kink shame.
I think that
this is a family-friendly podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's. Yeah.
Look, Radagast gets around.
Yeah, I mean, Radagast, I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't want to drink out of the same glass as him, I guess, is all I'm saying.
They don't call him the Brown for nothing.
Sanitary conditions, OSHA would be shutting that down so quick. Any other favorite mods?
My favorite mod for CK2 is a fantasy mod. It's Geheimersnacht, which is
yes, more Warhammer.
Yeah.
Drink, everyone drink.
I think it's 40k or fantasy. Well, fantasy is my big thing. Geheimersnacht does a fantastic job making each civilization feel very unique. So when you're playing the dwarves, you really do feel like you're playing a different game than when you're playing the Tomb Kings. The gameplay is completely different. I think any mod that can really diversify different sections of the game to make it feel like, a very unique gameplay is a good mod in my book. I don't want to keep going back to Civilization 4. But like,
that is kind of
that's a great point
is sort of the bedrock of what we know as PC strategy games.
Yeah.
Also, Civilization 4 specifically, I think, was the first game I remember where, like, I got... the first strategy game where I got super into mods with, there was some really good ones.
I was thinking of Fall from Heaven being a fantasy mod there, and that was the same sort of thing where each civilization felt entirely unique, the gameplay completely changed.
Right.
Even the way you viewed the map changed. So, for example, if you played, there was a pirate nation called the Nun, right? And when you played them, you stopped looking at the land as the decent tiles, and you started looking at the sea. So you started to look at the worlds, as a series of, the sea with a bit of coast, rather than the other way around, where the sea was something you kind of avoided. And
It's true of if you played Alpha Centauri, the one faction.
Oh, yes.
That, made cities on the ocean?
Yeah.
Why do you care for the land? The entire ocean is yours.
Exactly, yeah.
Less competition out here.
Though it was also interesting in Alpha Centauri because even if you played on the land, you could take the land back from the ocean.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, well, you could terraform it, couldn't you?
Yes. The world was a sandbox. It was your sandbox. You just had to be strong enough to take it.
I liked how the nuclear weapons caused craters too, which you could, which was a really nice touch. Man,
letting you have
it's gonna be hard
permanent...
to ever top Alpha Centauri. That's a game, true. Really, is it?
Yeah, being able to have a permanent impact on the map, I think, is something I've always really liked in strategy games. I like that Imperator is kind of making that more of a focus now. As far as what they've done, adding city foundings and stuff like that, being able to burn stuff down, always very cool in my book.
Oh yeah.
So I guess the upshot is, if you're making a strategy game, especially a grand strategy game, include mod support.
Yes. I can't think of a game these days that you would not want to put in mod support. It keeps the game alive. I know some people who only play modded CK2 or Stellaris. They don't touch the base game ever.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone plays Victoria 2 unmodded. Right? Everyone plays some form of mod for Victoria.
You should be playing, even if you just like vanilla Victoria 2. If you're not playing the historical flavor mod, you should be.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not going to be able to mention all of the great ones. Obviously, Kaiserreich is a big one. After the End, I know, was mentioned in chat, which is kind of the modern post-apocalyptic CK2 mod.
Yeah.
We want to talk to these people at some point. So if you're a mod creator that would be interested in coming on the podcast, NoCB on Twitter, or NoCBcast on Twitter.
Reach out to us.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll get more in depth on individual mods in the future, but modding overall, it's good. I think that might be one of the few things that everybody agrees on.
Unless you're creative
if you don't like the base
sometimes.
game, you can find a mod that gives you what you want, or you can make it.
I should say Lambert, I should say all players agree on. Whether the developers do or not is another story.
What I said is a little bit unfair. They do have mod support, but at the same time, they're not giving people as much tools to play with as they possibly could.
It's very difficult to make a total conversion mod in a modern Total War game.
It is. Yeah, 100%.
And then I'm just thinking back to Medieval 2 and how many total conversion mods were done and how well they were, and how
they were. The Lord of the Rings one, I think, is probably the best.
That is still played so frequently now.
It is. People are still playing the Lord of the Rings mod for Medieval 2
and it's still being updated.
Yeah. But I think
none of the more recent games have had as much modding flexibility, and they can't do the same things that they could back then.
Well, I'm at the moment playing on my channel a mod for Total War Attila that adds a new time frame to it. It's the 1212 AD mod.
Yes, I need to get around to it.
That's
released
really
campaign,
good.
Right? For that.
Yeah, they've just got the campaign in December. And it's really bloody good, but it'd be so nice if they were able to change the map, add new cities, that kind of thing, but that's just locked down. The cities that are in Total War Attila, they're the ones that are in every mod for Total War Attila. No new ones. And that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah,
that kind of ruins the fun of the mod, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
See, I tried to do my hand at a little bit of modding for Total War. I wanted, the Skaven, the bell mount for the Skaven. Well, Skaven goes around, but the bell just goes. It makes a thudding noise. It doesn't make bell noise. So I wanted to change it so you could. So every time the bell went, rather than making a thud noise, it made a big, loud, ringing bell noise.
It's a Skaven bell.
Of course,
it's not supposed to work like a bell.
Exactly. It has to. It wants it to be really loud and annoying, and I want that Skaven bell to be going ding, 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 ding as you're going into battle. But you can't do it. It's all locked, unfortunately. So
basically, you wanted to turn it into priority target number 1. Shut that fucking thing off.
But yeah, that's it was locked, which is a shame.
Yeah.
Mods for other games have become their own super popular games. Is a comment from chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah,
of course, Dota, yeah.
Yeah, before we get out of here, if anybody in chat has any questions for us, now is the time in the show where you might want to go ahead and drop those so we can answer them. If you're
watching us live, leave the comment here on Twitch and we'll answer it right away. If you're watching us somewhere else, you can either tweet it to us, leave it as a YouTube comment, and we'll see about answering it.
Shout it into the void.
Yeah. Just make sure we're at the other end of the void.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta shout it into the correct void. There's multiple voids. A lot of people don't know this.
What is the airspeed
and Radagast is like, oh really?
Swallow.
What kind of swallow? African or European?
Yeah.
I think that's how it goes.
Depends on its continent of origin. Yeah. So, how many piles is too many for toilet paper?
You never have enough toilet paper if you're living with a woman.
That's true. I can vouch for that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you should be keeping your toilet paper in piles, though. So I would say one pile is too many.
He said plies.
Plies. I thought it said piles. Oh, it isn't Li. Whatever.
Oh, plies. I'm dyslexic. How many plies is too many? I guess when it becomes thicker than its width.
Yeah, you don't want to be wasteful with toilet paper.
That's true.
That's a shit ton of plies.
Generally 2 to 3 I think is ideal. Less than that is unsanitary, and more than that would be wasteful.
That's a good question.
So,
finally, we have a relevant question.
Pass the toilet paper.
What would you say start and end dates be
podcast in a
Cold
dramatic
War
new direction?
games?
Could we add CC to the episodes? Yes, I will show Father Loris, who's doing the Twitch, how to put on
I'm
CC.
I'm actually doing. I usually do the uploads, but yeah, if there's an easy way to do that, I would love to do that.
I'll show you what I do with my stream to make it more accessible to everyone.
CK3 devs said that they'll be using a more detailed model of sexuality. What do you think a good model of human sexuality would represent? That's a question that could take up an entire podcast on its own.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it's something we're still kind of figuring out, I think.
And while there are
I know my answer is basically I have no idea.
Bisexual, homosexual, pansexual, asexual, demisexual. There's people that don't fit into any of those categories. So
I think what would be interesting is, like you mentioned before, TJ, is how it changes over time, right? Because these are not sort of fixed points.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that it's also something that can be fluid in my experience for certain. So yeah, I think as far as a game like CK2, I like that they're adding more granularity. Having 4 distinct sexualities represented in the game versus 2 is an improvement.
Yep.
I don't expect them to have the entire Kinsey scale modeled out with like all of these side labels that all have, meaningful gameplay impact. That might be something that would be better handled in a game that's about sexuality.
Yeah. And that's not even getting into trans, which is a whole different thing and wasn't even fully understood historically. Like if we look at Louis XIV's brother, which I completely spaced his name, was well known to have male lovers, had many children with his wife, was a brilliant commander on the battlefield, and liked wearing dresses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elagabalus, the Roman emperor, has been speculated, that he possibly was a trans person, or he/she, whatever interpretation you want to go with, because we'll never know.
Yep, and we'll never know because they may not have even used a definition that we would recognize in our modern world nowadays.
Right.
I think to bring it back to games, though, I think as long as it would have relevant gameplay impact, then it could be and should be modeled. But they shouldn't just be added if they're not going to have impacts.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you can ask the same question about a lot of other things, like how deep should they get into mental illness? Like, do we have separate traits for like obsessive compulsive disorder and bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder? Like, you do eventually have to draw a line somewhere that's like, this is not going to be meaningful to gameplay, so we're going to abstract because humans are just way too complicated to model.
You can abstract it into a historical way, right?
So we were talking about Crusader Kings here. When you throw it back into Crusader Kings, into the medieval ages, they didn't really understand mental disorders or mental illnesses at the time. And so in the game, you have possessed as a trait, which
absolutely,
exactly
what they thought.
Yeah, which is great because it both abstracts it and he also abstracts it in a sort of historical sense, right? So all these mental disorders are under a catch-all, which is, the way that the medieval world would have seen it, as some form of demon possession or,
Right.
Do we need leeches or do we need a priest? Those are your options.
It's like the two buttons you can press are leeches and priest.
That's the cure-all in the medieval world, just a bit of castration.
Yeah, light the western beacon for the priest, light the eastern beacon for the leeches.
And what if we need both?
Both beacons?
Both beacons firing up. That's where things get really serious,
Then we're going to need a bishop.
With his box of leeches.
Alfrey Strike says, what would you have the ideal start and end dates for a Cold War grand strategy game? I guess 1991 is sort of the logical end point, but I also feel like philosophically, like if I were in charge of Paradox, I don't want to make games about people that are still alive, which would be an issue with making a Cold War game, is that we're going to actually have to model characters in the game that are people who are still alive.
And current
which I guess
leaders
World War
of the world. And even then,
there are people who...
You get into who's playing the game. In terms of the people playing Hearts of Iron, there's very few people... There probably are no people that were alive during World War II that are playing Hearts of Iron.
Well,
my grandfather's in his 80s, and he was born about 2 years before the war started.
Yeah.
But if we go to Cold War, I know for a fact, like, both of my parents were involved in that. My grandfather was involved with that.
Yeah. Like Korea, I feel like the main reason that Dan Lind has said he doesn't really want to go further than Korea, maybe, partially has to do with the closer we get to the present, the shiftier sort of decisions you have to make about how to portray certain things. Even World War II
has questionable moments.
Some of these issues. Yeah, so...
That's an understatement.
Yeah, exactly.
Even you mentioning the Korean War, I lived in Korea for over 5 years. I'm married to a Korean.
Oh, wow, okay.
That's still very much alive over there in terms of the memorials and what students remember and what students learn in school and such. And I know there's quite a few people that play Grand Paradox games that live in Korea. You can just go looking for people with Hangul names, streaming it on Twitch.
Yeah.
It's a market for them, and it would be just as like doing the Iraq War in some ways here in the States. It would push too many tender buttons.
Yeah. I mean, this is part of why I think I like games that are set hundreds of years in the past better overall than the ones that are more recent.
You can give traits to characters that lived, 800 years ago, and their son is not going to come around and say, hey, my dad actually wasn't possessed lunatic spawn of Satan. Yes. I find that very offensive. Like, you're going to...
Well, mine was, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, if we try to set something in the 1800s in the U.S. or something, who was it? Tyler, the president who died, Harrison, who died from the flu right after pneumonia right after.
William Henry Harrison.
Yes. Tyler, I forgot the rest of his name. He's a forgettable president, but he still has a grandson. He still has 2 grandsons alive.
Interesting.
Learned that this week.
Not Zachary Taylor.
No, Tyler. It was a Tyler president.
Tyler. I'm like,
This is
we
one
have
of
I feel so.
Forgettable.
Yeah, like we have a
John
president
Tyler.
named Tyler.
John Tyler.
Speaking of-
John Tyler.
Speaking of
I was
mods in
thinking
the
Tyler,
Cold
like,
War, though,
yeah.
this the New World Order, which is New Hearts of Iron. But that's an interesting way of doing things, just setting in an alternate timeline.
There's a couple people on the Lore Sworn Order Discord who are super into the TNO mod, and I haven't checked it out yet, but I definitely will.
It's not fully released; it's just for beta that's out at the moment. But the world is wonderful. You know, it's
yeah.
Don't be
that much
put off
lore-esque.
by the pretext, which is the Nazis won World War II. The world is horrific. It's a really grim, dark, horrible world.
Yeah. Well, and that might be the right way to handle the latter 20th century, rather than doing a Cold War game or a Cold War expansion, is just to
Do an alternate history.
make it ridiculous and ahistorical, so that nobody takes it too seriously. I know one of the talks, Podcat Dan Lind mentioned that an interesting way to extend the timeline for Hearts of Iron 4 might be to do like the Cold War gone hot. If there's an interesting way to do that without, sidestepping the idea that if that had happened, we would have just bombed each other to nuclear oblivion. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good wrap up to our discussion of mods for the various Paradox games. Do you guys have any final thoughts? And or would you like to plug anything before we get out of here today?
I think I'm good.
Yeah,
Yeah?
I'm good. I don't have anything to plug. I've been just recovering from New Year's, to be honest. So
Yeah. As have we all, yeah.
Yeah, I think we answered the questions that were sent to us. I think we
All
covered
right.
it all.
So Rose, where can people find your stuff normally?
Enigmatic Rose 4 on Twitch is where I am 5 or 6 days a week.
And what are you currently doing right now?
Currently, we're a bit addicted to Stardew and RimWorld, which are totally not grand strategy games, but they're a hell of a lot of fun.
I still haven't played RimWorld yet, but I
What
love
mods do you
Stardew.
play with RimWorld?
I'm actually not playing with any mods.
Oh my god, no! I'm in that game, by the way, or rather, my son is in that game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when RimWorld was being out on Kickstarter, I backed it, and everyone that backed it got to put a character in the game. So I put Logan Lambert, my son,
Nice.
about 3 years before I had a son.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I had
So
to choose
he-
a first name, and I chose my favorite male first name. So, and then I called my son him that as well. So.
Is that in any way X-Men related, or is it for other reasons?
Not X-Men related. No. If anything, it's the cheesy 90s TV show Dark Angel.
Okay.
With
All
Jessica
right.
Alba in it, the
remember
main
that.
male character, the one that was in the wheelchair. His name was Logan, and I remember loving that name. So that's probably where it came from.
Nice. So Lambert, where can people find your stuff, and what are you up to lately?
Still on youtube.com/Lambert2191 and dlive.tv/Lambert2191 at the moment. I started 2 new multiplayers, one where I am observing a huge 40-something player Imperator game with the Death of Alexander kind of start, where all of the big powers are broken up. And it went surprisingly well, considering how sometimes unstable Imperator can be. So it was very ambitious, but it paid off. And then another multiplayer where I'm playing as Macedon.
Sweet.
Interesting.
Loris, where can people go to find your work?
Chapelcomic.com. It's the place for all the comics.
Excellent.
And I'm still in commission hell. I've seen the lights at the moment. I'm just like, I'm out of dis, and now I'm heading up to the, through purgatory.
Moving on up through the lower spheres.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at AsaTJ. That's ASATJ. My YouTube channel is The Lore Sworn Order, which hasn't had anything new posted to it in a while, but ... and I will leave it at that. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you like to get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, we're on Spotify, we're on iTunes, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch. It's NoCB Cast pretty much everywhere. If you want to leave us a review on your favorite podcast app to help us get more visibility, that's of course appreciated. Or just share us around whatever communities of grand strategy enthusiasts you happen to be involved in.
Or just strategy people if you're trying to get them interested in.
Or just strategy people.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, if you're trying to push them into the grand strategy world.
Yeah. Yeah. Introduce them to your dealer. We'll get them hooked. Don't worry. Yeah. I think that is going to do it. So we will see you guys same time next week.
Okay.
Bye.
All right.
Have a lovely week.
Bye, guys.